A warning before we start. Today's episode contains graphic descriptions of Russia's war crimes in Ukraine that some listeners may find disturbing.
Justice shouldn't be dependent on how and when the war will end. We cannot wait, which means that we have to establish a special tribunal on aggression now and hold people guilty in this crime accountable.
From Friends of Europe, this is Policy Voices. I'm Catarina Vila Nova. Today on the show, what it will take to break Russia's cycle of impunity. I'm joined by Oleksandra Matviichuk, an Ukrainian human rights lawyer. She heads the Center for Civil Liberties, which was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in the same year Russia started the large-scale invasion of Ukraine. Since then, Oleksandra's organization has documented more than 80,000 war crimes committed by Russian soldiers in Ukraine. But as she reminds us, the war started much before 2022. Here's my conversation with Oleksandra Matviichuk. So just last month, legal experts agreed on a framework for a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. And this will allow for the prosecution of senior Russian officials for planning and coordinating the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Oleksandra, why was this such a significant milestone?
It's a very important issue because everything which we are documenting is a result of the leadership decision of Putin and top political leadership and high military command of Russian state to start this war. So all atrocities, all war crimes, all crimes humanity, it's just a result of this leadership decision. And if we want to prevent wars in the future, we have to punish a state and their leaders who start such wars in present. It's a common sense. But in the whole history of humankind, we have only one such a precedent. It was Nuremberg trial. A trial where Nazi war criminals were tried only after Nazi regime had collapsed. And last century, it was an essential step to establish law and justice. But we live in new one. We must move further. Justice shouldn't be dependent on how and when the war will end. We cannot wait, which means that we have to establish a special tribunal on aggression now and hold people guilty in this crime accountable.
We'll get a bit into the technicalities, and that's why it's great to be speaking with an expert such as yourself. When we talk about crimes of aggression, crimes against humanity, it was important to create this special tribunal because it fills a void that was created by the limitation of the International Criminal Court, ICC, which can only go after Russian nationals for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. But weirdly enough, not for the crime of invading Ukraine itself. And as you mentioned the last time that the crime of aggression was brought to justice was during the Nuremberg trials after World War II. So why is it important to distinguish between these two sets of crimes? Why is it important to prosecute not only the crimes that are happening in Ukraine, but also the crime of aggression itself?
Because we have to fill this gap, a gap of accountability, which we have in international law. As you rightly mentioned, unfortunately, even International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction over the crime of aggression when we speak about situation of Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. And that's why we need to create an international court ad hoc to be able to prosecute such crime.
And so, you're a human rights lawyer expert. Can you explain what would be the difference in jurisdiction? What are we talking about when we're talking about a special tribunal that would prosecute the crime of aggression? And when we talk about the ICC, what jurisdiction do they have? How would that play out? If you can paint this picture for us.
Let me remind that there are 4 types of international crimes: crimes of aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And the International Criminal Court have jurisdiction over the 3 other types of crimes which I mentioned, but not crime of aggression. And Russia, unfortunately, commit all these types of crimes. And this means that in order to fill this gap, we have to create a special tribunal on aggression to hold Putin and his surrounding accountable. And why it's important? Because we have to put the war beyond the legal frame. What do I mean? When we look to the different tribunals which we have in the human history, like Yugoslavia Tribunal, Rwanda Tribunal, Special Court in Sierra Leone, and so on and so forth, I will simplify, but it was a court where people were tried because they killed each other not according to the norms. So if they will kill each other according to the norms of international humanitarian and international criminal law, they will not be punished. And it's not okay. We have to prohibit aggressive war as such. We have to make the sentence in UN Charter that the aggressive war, it's illegal, to put this sentence into force, to make it practice, to make it reality.
And the Council of Europe hopes that this special tribunal would be established by the end of this year. What would be, once there is a final political agreement on the special tribunal, what would be then the next step? So if everything goes as it should be, what's going to happen next, and what would be the ultimate outcome of the special tribunal?
First, we have to clarify several important questions which is still unclear for me. For example, the first question is, will this tribunal be created as international court or as hybrid court? What's the difference? And the difference is crucial because only international court has jurisdiction to overcome immunity which Putin has according to international law. So, which means that if we create special tribunal on aggression as a hybrid court, as a part of national system, it means that this tribunal will have no power to prosecute President of Russia, which is a little bit strange because we'll invest a lot of efforts to create a special tribunal to prosecute the responsible person for the crime of aggression, and this tribunal will have no power to prosecute the most responsible one. Another question, which is also very important and will have a huge legal consequences in the future. What will be the timeline for this tribunal? Because this war started not in February 2022. This war started in February 2014, when Russia invaded Ukraine, occupied Crimea, and part of Lugansk and Donetsk regions. Only 3 years ago, Russia extended this war to the large-scale invasion. So aggression is going on for 11 years, not for 3. What will be the timeline for special tribunal? Will this tribunal to start to investigate crimes only from the February 2022 and close the eyes for previous 8 years of aggression? So it's another important question because it's not just legal issues. Dozens of thousands of Ukrainians suffered in previous 8 years. And this decision of the special tribunal will provide or close for them, for these people, a chance for compensations, for example. So a lot of things has to be fixed. I just mentioned these two important questions. But when we create the special tribunal, I'm sure that it will not last in for years and years because aggression is very visible. It's not a case when in 2014, then unidentified green man appeared in Crimean Peninsula and Putin openly lied. He told it's not Russian soldiers. And when first time we found Russian soldiers in eastern region, they told they just lost. It's happened. So now it's very visible that Russia invaded. The question will be the circle of responsible people who took this decision, who will be guilty on the opinion of the judges of this tribunal.
Of course, because this time Putin himself admits to the invasion. Of course, he doesn't. He would call it something different, but at the end of the day, we all know what we're talking about here. It's a question of semantics. But ultimately, hearing what you're saying, it makes me wonder then why indeed would a decision be made to create such a tribunal, investing so much time and money in something that ultimately would have no teeth if you don't make it as an international court, as you explained it. Ultimately, who gets to make this decision? Also, the question of the timeline. Are we starting this tribunal only on the facts that started in February 2022, or are we going all the way back to 2014? Who's the decision maker here?
The founders. The states who now discussing the creation of the special tribunal, this core group of more than 40 states. I don't know what will be the position of United States, because today we got news that United States withdrawn their specialists from the working group who investigated Russian war crimes. So probably United States now will lost their interest to creation of the special tribunal, but still other states remains, and it will be their decision and their responsibility. And let me explain also that even if they create a special tribunal as a hybrid court, it still have a value. It will be just very difficult to explain the ordinary people in Ukraine, in France, in Germany, in Brazil, that why this tribunal has no power according Putin, because it was his leadership decision. It will be very difficult to understand for ordinary people, but it still have a huge value to create such a tribunal, because they will identify the circle of Putin who participated in this decision. And when Putin will lost his power, hybrid tribunal can have power and jurisdiction against him as well.
When you mean when Putin loses power, so if in the end it's a hybrid court that is established, that means that Putin can only be prosecuted once he is no longer the president of Russia, correct?
Exactly, because according to the decision of UN Court of Justice, only international courts has jurisdiction to overcome immunity which acting head of the state has, and other members of Troika.
And that is why, for example, the International Criminal Court currently has an arrest warrant for Putin for war crimes. And of course, he would also be the most likely defendant in this new special tribunal, because as president of Russia, ultimately he's the one that has to respond for the crime of aggression. But so what I'm seeing here is many obstacles that need to be removed for Putin and also other Russian leaders to face justice. What are these obstacles? Not only judicial obstacles, but also political obstacles, now that, of course, Donald Trump is back in the White House?
It's obvious. We live in non-ideal world. There is law, there is politics, and there is gap between law and politics. But justice is very important. I mentioned before that all these crimes which we are documenting, it's result of the Putin and his surrounding leadership decision to start this war. So let me just a little bit to explain what we are documenting. We are documenting how Russian troops deliberately hit residential buildings, schools, churches, museums, and hospitals, how they killed people in evacuation corridors, how they tortured people in filtration camps, how they forcibly taken Ukrainian children to Russia, how they banned Ukrainian language and culture in occupied territories, and how they abducting, robbing, raping, and killing civilians there. So this leadership decision to start aggressive war literally opened a path to hell for millions of people in Ukraine. And that's why it's very important to punish for this leadership decision. We have in our database more than 81,000 episodes of war crimes. And this is just a tip of iceberg, which was documented by Civil Initiative. Can you imagine how much crimes Russians have already done? Russia uses war crimes as the methods of warfare. It's a way how Russia tries to break people's resistance and occupy the country by the tool which I call the immense pain on civilian population. And we document this pain. And I know, speaking with my friends and colleagues, Russian human rights defenders, that Russian troops committed the same crimes in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Georgia, in Mali, in Libya, in Syria, in other countries of the world. They have never been punished. They believe they can do whatever they want. So we must break the circle of impunity. We have to find a way how to punish perpetrators for crime of aggression, for war crimes, for crimes against humanity, for genocide, not just for people in Ukraine, but to prevent the next Russian attack to the next nation. Because Russia, it's a country which for decades uses a war as a tool how to achieve its geopolitical interests and uses war crimes for decades as the methods how to win this war.
I just want to make a small clarification. You mentioned the number of around 80,000 war crimes that you've documented. This only, of course, not only, but since 2022?
Yes, it's just for last 3 years. Just to compare, Office of General Prosecutor in Ukraine officially registered and investigated more than 150,000 criminal proceedings. So can you imagine this? Not just burden of responsibility, which legal enforcement bodies have to convey, but this enormous pain which Russians brought to Ukrainian land.
And this incredibly important work of documenting war crimes, it's one of the core works that the Center for Civil Liberties, the organization that you lead, which won the Nobel Peace Prize the same year that Russia invaded Ukraine. So this documentation of crimes perpetrated by Russian soldiers in Ukraine, can you talk me through what is your process here? How are you creating this immense documentation of war crimes?
When Russia started large-scale war, we faced with enormous amount of war crimes. And in order to be effective, we united our efforts with dozens of organizations from different regions. We built a national network of local documentators. We covered the whole country, including the occupied territories. And that is why, working together, we jointly documented more than 81,000 episodes of war crimes. And when I try to explain what we are doing for general audience, I use this wording. The war turns people into the numbers. What we are literally doing, we are returning people their names. Because people are not numbers. Life of each person matters. And that is why we invest enormous efforts and resources to investigate and to document what happened with an ordinary farmer in a small village in far from region in Ukraine, because life of each person matters. And this is a meaning of justice.
Can you share with me some of these stories so we're not, we just, the people that are listening to this don't just have this number of 80,000 in their heads?
I personally interviewed hundreds of people who survived Russian captivity, and they told me horrible stories, how they were beaten, raped, smashed into wooden boxes, their fingers were cut, their nails were torn away, their nails were drilled, they were electrically shocked through their own genitalia. One woman told me how her eye was the couch with a small So I'm documenting such war for 11 years already, because once again, this war started not in February 2022, but in February 2014, when Ukraine got a chance for democratic transition after the collapse of authoritarian, corrupt pro-Russian government due to revolution and dignity. But probably I will share with you one story which impressed me very much, because it's a story of a child. And I have never interviewed children. This is my red line. I can't. I feel enormous guilt to speak with children, because being adults, I can't protect them from all this horror which they experience. So this story was documented by my colleague. And this is a story of a 10-year-old boy, Ilya, from Mariupol. When Russian troops tried to siege the city, they didn't allow International Committee of Red Cross to evacuate civilians. And hence Ilya and his mother, like other people in Mariupol, they have to hide in the basement of their residential building from Russian shelling. They melted snow to have water, and they made fires to cook at least some food. But when supplies ran out, they were forced to go out, and suddenly they appeared in the center of Russian shelling. Ilya's mother was hit in her head, and the boy's leg was torn. With the last strength, his mother took her son to the front apartment. It was no medical assistance, because prior to this, Russians deliberately destroyed maternity hospital and entire medical infrastructure in the Mariupol. So in this front apartment, they just lie down on a couch and hugged each other. And they were lying like this for several hours. And this 10-year-old boy, Ilya, told to my colleague that his mother died and got frozen right in his arms. It's unimaginable horror, not just for a child.
Do you need a minute?
No, I'm fine.
We can, if you need a moment, it's okay. We can pause if you need
No,
to.
we can continue, don't worry.
I also can't imagine the personal toll that this work must take on you, which is, I mean, so clear from just talking to you right now and hearing your voice. And I know whoever's going to be listening to us can't see what I'm seeing right now. Not just because the work itself is extremely painful, but also because you're talking about the people in your own country. It's your own country that it's suffering. How can you keep going? How do you have the strength to not give up?
When I was student of law faculty, I told to myself that I will never ever do something which connected with criminal law, because I have a huge empathy to people. I love people, so it will harm me. Now you can start laughing, because for 11 years, I'm not just dealing with with criminal law. I'm working with international humanitarian, international criminal law, with the most horrible atrocities which you can just imagine. So my main finding and discovering is that something which I saw as a source of vulnerability, my empathy, is not just a working tool which helped me to establish connections with people affected by this war, to build trust, and they will share the stories with me. But this is a source of strength. This is a source of power. Empathy provides me energy to overcome this pain and this other negative emotions and go further. I'm several times noticed when I just start to speak details of cases on which we are working to more pragmatic so-called men and women, they can't stand even to hear these details of case, which we are having in our database. But I can not just hear, but to work with it, because my empathy to people provide me strength. And also because I feel a huge responsibility. When I interviewed survivors from Russian captivity, I used the same questionnaire. It's like general methodology. And we have in this questionnaire a question. Did you apply to legal enforcement bodies or to international organizations? And some people, very confident, told no. And we don't plan to apply. And I asked why. And they answered, because we have no belief that these people who tortured and raped us, they will be punished, that Russia will give these people to international or national courts. It's never happened. We have no such hope. And then I asked them, but you came to me and you are telling the story to me. And after several such interactions, I understood that even those people who told that they have no trust and no hope that justice is possible, still have this hope. And they behavior like this: okay, we don't want to be disappointed, but if there is a tiny chance, we want our story to be heard. We want our story to be recorded. And that is why I know from my own experience that people who went through hell, they need to restore not just their broken lives, broken families, a broken vision of the future, but also their broken belief that justice is possible.
As a human rights lawyer, I mean, I don't want to ask if you still have hope, because I think it's very clear that you do. But do you still believe in the international system? Do you believe that Putin and other Russian leaders will end up in front of a judge to be tried by the crimes they are committing in your country?
Now I'm in a situation when the law doesn't work. In 2022, the UN Court of Justice issued an intermediate decision and obliged Russia to immediately withdraw their troops from Ukraine. And Russia ignored even the decision of UN Court of Justice. So what legal tools we can use just to stop Russian atrocities? Nothing. But I do believe that it's temporary, because it's not the first time in the human history when the law doesn't work, but then the humankind managed to restore the legal order. And that is why all our efforts have a huge sense, because international crimes have no statute of limitations, which means that even if we have no political opportunities to prosecute Putin with legal instruments today, tomorrow, when the political situation will change, we will succeed. And this is the most documented war in the human history, which means that in future, we will present in court not our tears, not our words, but evidence.
Oleksandra, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And that's it for today's show. I'm Catarina Vila Nova, and Policy Voices will be back again next week. Until then, goodbye.